Welcome to a Second Chance at Life podcast. I'm your host, Arvilla Beckworth, and welcome to another episode. Over the last few weeks, we've been speaking on mental health and its effect on our life. Well, this week, I want to take a different spin. We're talking about anxiety, high functioning depression. Now, I want to talk about self isolation. One of my good friends, Starr, she's a health and well being coach. She's going to join me on this conversation as we dig deeper. Starr, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. Would
Good.
you mind introducing yourself and telling my listeners a little bit about you?
Absolutely. I am Starr Griffin, and you've known me for a number of years. And I
Yes.
have been in the health and wellness industry for just right at 19 years. Right now, my largest amount of time I've spent experiencing as a health and well-being coach. So I speak to um, weight management, tobacco cessation, exercise, back pain, but we also go to the whole person, right? So we're going to spend
Right.
time talking about uh, depression, anxiety, some of the mental health factors, especially how they impact women and the Black community.
Love it. And as we talk about it, in this day and age, we can connect with anyone via social media
Mhm.
or any platform that, like even right now, we can see us.
Yeah.
In your opinion, why do you think we still feel lonely, even though we have the connection of Zoom and YouTube Live? A lot of us still feel like we're in the space of being lonely.
Absolutely. My thought is that it's while it's a form of connection, it's not what I refer to as true connection. I think
Mhm.
as humans, we are designed for true interaction. And some of that does involve the physical connection, being physically in proximity with someone else. And so we don't get to do just the small touch. And when I refer to touch, even throughout this conversation, I'm talking about affection, not sexual. I think we kind of
Right.
often just go off into the sexual realm, but I think of just in the basic society, the functionality of affection and
Right.
somebody and holding their hand or touching their back and really having those kind of intimate and personal conversations where you're in a private space. When we are connected on social media and over the internet, it's true. You and I are having a conversation now. This will be shared later, but sometimes the internet isn't always secure, right? And sometimes you can get hacked and things can be happening. And so it's
Right.
not always the true sense of the physical kind of connection that you can have with someone. So I think it replaces it. It does a great job in a smaller market, but
Mhm.
when it becomes your main form of communication, most of us are working from home now.
Right.
Many of us have our long distance relationships and friendships. We have social media. So we don't ever really have an actual connection of a person being in a room with us.
Mhm.
We just have computers and technology. So I think it doesn't truly replace that intimacy that you can have when you're physically in a space with someone.
And some researchers state that loneliness is closely linked to our mental health. They
Absolutely.
believe that we're currently experiencing a loneliness epidemic due to the
Mhm.
prolong of the pandemic. Did you experience any social isolation during the pandemic?
I did. And this question is very interesting to me because I am in a spectrum that I feel sometimes is often overlooked. I think there are often many boxes that we plug, right?
Mhm.
You're a mom, you're a wife, you have you're a business owner, you're this. We have all of these things that we are, and so sometimes we're classified. We file into these filings, and some of those classifications are overlooked.
Right.
I am a single, never married. I don't have children, and so during the pandemic, living by myself. So what? Even though I enjoy my alone time,
Right.
I no longer had the option to now just go out and connect. When I was ready to be out and engage and meet with my friends, I didn't have that. And so for me, it became a time of just complete isolation where I didn't have a dog. I didn't have there was nothing. There's no one around me. And while the reason why I mentioned that it may have been a little bit overlooked is because the comments you get as a person that is a single unit living by themselves, it's often, oh, that must be nice. I wish I could do that. I wish, here, let me send my husband and kids over to you. They're bothering me. It must be nice. I would love to get away, and be alone and spend time by ourselves. And while I can appreciate that millions of people were stuck together, right? They were all stacked on top of each other in their house and confined to their homes and not being able to go out and get out. For those that are not in any type of functional relationship, don't have a roommate, don't have someone physically there with them, we are now confined to just the alone time. There isn't even the option to go out and connect with your friends or, see someone else or, experience a hug. I didn't hug or see anyone in person for 4.5 months. It was a very tricky time. So while many people are thinking, oh no, that must be nice, and I did enjoy my time, but the option to connect was gone. So to me, my personal experience, social isolation is very real, very real.
And I know we've talked about it, the new normal. Even when the pandemic started, we're like, what is this new normal going to look like?
Yes.
What were some of the things that you had to adjust to for your new normal?
It's my new normal included how the pandemic impacted my mental space. And so there was, for me personally, and for those that didn't know me and I didn't speak about it, I've had a level of depression and anxiety that I experienced during that time. I was going through a multitude of things that many people went through during the pandemic. So I was not lost, right? I was in the company of the world. But the new normal then was now having to shift back to wanting to go out and engage and wanting to be out in person in spaces, because for that time, very critical time, people were dangerous. You didn't want to walk on the same side
We
of the
talked
street.
about
You
that.
didn't know if COVID was going to get you, or if the germs were going to jump off, or so there was a time where we were alarmed. We didn't want to touch doors, we didn't want to hug, we didn't want to, you just couldn't be in this intimate space. And so now that we had this 6 feet bubble and 6 feet apart, wanting to go back and assimilate into society actually became a challenge, because you became comfortable with, well, I don't have to interact. I can get my groceries delivered. I can get all my food delivered. I can go pick it up and someone can put it in the trunk. I can get on Zoom and see my friends. I work from home. I don't need to leave the house.
Right.
So now the new normal for me is making sure that for my mental preservation, to make sure that I am engaging, making sure that I keep up with my social skills beyond social media, being able to go out and hold conversations in actual spaces. So my new normal was adjusting to getting back to wanting to do those things, because everything did become very convenient. So that's been my transition so far.
And as things return back to what they call normal, like you said, some of us were used to being inside so long that when it came back to going back to school or going to work or doing the other outside activities, we became afraid. And it was like, okay, what do we do now that they want us to go back into society? How did you deal with the post-lockdown anxiety?
Yeah, I think for me, it was very important for me to show myself grace and to do whatever was comfortable for me. We had the unfortunate circumstance of this pandemic becoming dangerously political and having lots of different opinions, to where if you wore a mask, you were harassed. If you didn't, you were harassed. If there were all of these different sides and things, and it just built this tension. And so there were people that were afraid to go out and wear a mask because they were seen as, oh, you're whatever the stereotype or stigma or whatever it was for wearing a mask. There were the people that didn't feel comfortable going out without their mask. There were the people that didn't feel comfortable going with them and without. And so there was all kind of that transition back and forth, like, what do you do? And so I had to make up my mind. I'm going to wear my mask. That was what I was comfortable with. And what else kept me comfortable is minding my business. So if you wanted to wear a mask, great. If you didn't, great. That had nothing to do with me. It didn't.
Mhm.
I didn't take on the consumption of, oh, these people have to wear masks because I do.
Mhm.
These people don't have to wear masks because I, whatever other people were doing, that was on them.
Right.
And I had to be able to stand my ground for my own decision. And my own decision was to wear a mask. Um, I also made sure that I slowly eased back into going out into open spaces. And so what that might have looked like is, you know, doing a very small run for maybe 2 or 3 items that I needed at Target.
Mhm.
And I would run and go get those and come back out and, assess, how did I feel? Check in. Are you okay? Did you feel anxious? Did you feel nervous? Did you feel scared? If you did, what was the reason? Um, what Once you discovered the reason, what did you feel like you could do about it? I felt pretty good getting back into the rhythm. I
Mhm.
still personally will choose to wear a mask depending upon the atmosphere that I'm going into. And I am comfortable and confident with that decision. But not all of us feel like that, right?
Right.
So, I have experienced people harassing or saying certain things because I have on a mask, and yeah, that's still my decision. And so I'm going to stick with that. I have now gone back into going to restaurants and feeling a little bit more comfortable moving around, but I made sure that I did it on my time,
Mhm.
with my own comfort level. And if that meant that I went out once a week for several weeks, okay, then the next several weeks go out twice a week. And then the next week go 3 times. Whatever it looked like for me, I honored that space and then made an attempt. So I did make sure to make the attempt, though, that
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't allow myself to just not go out. I was like, no, you got to try to start getting back out there. So it was really about finding my comfort level and then sticking with that.
Now, I wanted to go back to the question where you talked about, you being single versus someone that may have a husband, children, or family.
Mhm.
How can we, and I'll speak from my own experience, I have a husband, I may not have children that stay at home, but what if I wanted to recognize or look out for the signs in other family members or friends? What symptoms should I be looking for to see if someone's being socially isolated?
Mhm. That's a great question because the signs and symptoms are not going to be universal. So I honestly think asking the question flat out
Okay.
is probably the number one piece of advice. What it does is it creates the space that the person can confide in you. And I think as long as we know for a singular unit, as long as I know that I'm safe enough to share my experience
Mhm.
with whoever I'm talking with, that's what's going to allow me to be able to open up. So being able to just flat out ask, how are you?
Yeah.
And acknowledge the point, hey, you might be by yourself. How did this impact you? Are you having issues or concerns with getting back out into society? Do you feel isolated? Do you feel alone? And really not being afraid to ask the question flat out.
Mhm.
I think sometimes we kind of want to skirt around it because we don't want to, bother them. We don't want to
Yeah.
make too much of it. But I think asking by actually using the words, do you feel isolated? Do you feel alone? Do you feel like you have what you need? And then beyond that, of course, because we can lie to you, right? And say, no, I'm fine. I'm
Right,
doing
right.
okay. um I think it's really being able to hear what isn't being said, and that takes active listening, reflective listening, and really being able to be in tune with what that person may or may not be communicating.
Okay.
So, for example, if it were me and I was like, "No, girl, I'm fine," and maybe the next conversation is, "Okay, well, how was your week? Hey, when's the last time? I know you like to go to meetups and stuff. What's the last meetup you had?" Well, if I haven't told you about one in 6 months, there, there, there might be a little bit of isolation there. Or if I'm, not talking about connection with other people, if I'm telling you about all the things that I'm watching and all the things that I'm seeing on social media, but I'm not talking about experiences that I've had out in the world, that could be a pretty good indication that they might be experiencing a level of isolation. And that's where I think that flat, blunt communication
Right.
is going to help bridge the gap so that that person knows that they're safe, and b, you can also then truly identify and allow them to identify, because they might not necessarily think that they're isolated,
Right,
right?
exactly.
They
Yeah.
might just be like, no, actually, this is, so really assessing, hey, are you isolated? Do you feel alone? And do you have what you need?
Mm.
How are you feeling? How is this impacting you? And really making sure that we're asking our singular units, how are you? Are you okay? And not just going, oh, you must be fine, because I would love to be alone. I would love to have my space by myself. But don't assume that. Don't assume that we might be okay with that.
Right.
Go ahead and create that space for us to say whether or not we are.
Now, I don't know if you remember this conversation we had. You said a friend of yours um, was talking about just basically what was going on in the pandemic,
Mhm.
but it was almost to the fact where you said like you were by yourself. If no one checks in on you and see if you're okay, no one would ever know. And I can't remember that conversation, and maybe you can bring it more to the forefront. But could
Absolutely.
you talk more about that? Because I thought that was a really good eye opener that, like
Yes.
you said, being a singular unit, if no one is checking on you, you could be passed out somewhere and nobody would notice because you
Exactly.
are in that isolation.
Yes.
Go ahead. I
Yeah.
would like for you to talk more about that because I thought it was a good subject.
Absolutely. That was a conversation that myself, and one of my girlfriends in another state, who is also a singular unit, doesn't have kids, isn't married, and was living alone during the pandemic. And her and I would check in with each other quite often. And she
Mhm.
and she said, I'm scared. And I said, what are you scared about? Tell me what's going on. She said, if something happens to me, no one would know. And I
Mm.
said, you're absolutely right. And it's a very unique experience to feel like that in and of itself. And I want to be clear to make sure that, you know, that I'm not keeping singular units over here by themselves, because you can be a married person and feel the way that we feel, right? So
Right.
I'm not dismissing anyone else's experiences, but this was just two people who did not have any other human connection.
Mhm.
And the expectation was that we were just going to be fine.
Mhm.
And during the pandemic, my car wasn't moving because I was working from home. I was at home. I work from home now. So
Mhm.
my car never moves. So my neighbors wouldn't necessarily be alerted to, well, something might be wrong because her car is always home. Well, it's always home anyway.
Right.
um, if you don't see me come outside, well, typically you're not going to see me for a stretch of time because I'm going to be working.
Mhm.
And so, how would someone know, unless you are actively checking in and actively know their schedule? How
Right.
would someone know if I fall down the stairs and pass out? If something happens, excuse me, during my sleep, and I, have transitioned on, who would know?
Right. Right.
Who would know? And because there isn't someone that you actively connect with on a consistent basis, they wouldn't know.
Right.
They wouldn't know. And it can be a sobering experience when you think of that. So for me personally, I chose to try to make sure that I articulated that with people who would check on me,
Mhm.
who would
Yeah.
go, hey, I'm going to call you. Okay. She didn't call back. That's fine. I'm gonna call her again. She didn't call back. I'm gonna
Mhm.
text. Wait, why isn't she text? So someone would at least know my pattern to know, wait, she hasn't responded to any of these things. Let me send help, or let me send, making sure that my friends had my address.
Right.
Making sure, there's, because not only that, they don't even know where I live. We don't know each other's phone numbers by heart anymore, right? Because
Isn't
everything's
that
in
the
your
truth? Yeah.
yeah, everything's in your phone. So you're like, I wouldn't even know how to get, I wouldn't know where to send help or what their phone number is. So it's a very sobering experience. That I commended her for feeling safe enough to tell me that. But it also was sad because there's multiple people feeling like that. And it's a scary experience.
Yeah. And when you told me that, it's like I had to think twice about that because I was like, you know what? She's right. I mean, you just don't assume to check in on people, and
Mhm.
the times you do check in, the very next day might have been the day they needed you to check in on them. So when you had
Mhm.
brought that to my attention that, she said she was afraid because she wasn't sure somebody would check in on her, I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that's somebody else's reality.
Yeah.
Me being alone, being single, what if somebody doesn't come checking on me?
Mhm.
So and that's why I was like, let me bring that up. I think that'll be a good eye opener, especially if you have family members that are single or, like you said, even married. Just
Mhm.
checking in on people in general that they feel alone and just making sure you have that sense of community. Because I think that's the one thing
Yes.
that I learned in the pandemic. people became real isolated
Absolutely.
into self. So
Mhm.
that community wasn't there. So it's like you almost had to reintroduce community back into your life,
Absolutely.
letting people know how you feel mentally, letting them know that I'm not okay, letting them know that, hey, today I'm just not feeling good.
Mhm.
But it's like now we have to be more intentional with telling people that, especially the ones that we know that are really for us and we
Yes.
have that safe space.
Mhm.
We want to tell them what's going on so they can check on us. Because, like you said,
Yes.
if no one's checking on you and you fell down the stairs, well, 2 months later, it's not going to do you no good if you're only checking on me every 2 months. Something
Right.
happened.
Right. That's exactly
So,
it. That's exactly it. Do you mind if I add really quickly too? I think
yes.
one of the things that we also have to do is make sure that um, we, just like we have to kind of relearn that sense of community, we have to relearn how to hear. We
Mm,
have to relearn how to communicate,
that's a good one.
because there's also the people who don't know how to articulate what they need.
Yes.
So, what if I don't know how to tell you that I'm scared and I don't feel safe, or that I feel like, what if I don't know how to say that?
Hmm.
What if I'm afraid to say that or embarrassed to say that? So that's where us, as support, as a support system, we have to learn how to hear that. We have to learn how to communicate or ask the questions flat out, with the actual words, and not be afraid to have a taboo conversation.
Hmm.
Not be afraid to ask, are you depressed? Are you experiencing anxiety? Do you feel alone? Do you feel lonely? Do you feel like, where you're at right now? Do you feel like it could lead down a path where you might harm yourself or others? We have to
Mm.
be able to say the words, and not only expect someone to tell us,
Right.
because they might not be able to tell us. We also have a culture, and I speak to this quite heavily in different platforms because I am a Christian. And
Mhm.
that faith base for me has been a struggle in these last couple of years, because I feel like it's one of the things that has failed me. Not God. God did not fail me, but the religion of Christianity has failed me. So my teaching and my upbringing and my indoctrination is, you just pray. You just pray. You just pray. You feel bad. You don't worry about it. You just pray. You let it go. Let Jesus have it. Let the Holy Spirit do this. And there's kind of this. So you almost don't, you can experience a level of shame
Mm.
if you're saying, I have faith in this big old powerful God, but I'm still lonely.
Right.
I'm
Right.
still depressed. I'm still anxious, because your community will then say, well, just pray. Well, you don't have faith. You're not, so you don't want to articulate that I'm feeling alone and that I'm afraid that somebody gonna find me at the bottom of my stairs and I'm not gonna be alive. Like, you
Right.
don't
Right.
want to say
Right.
that, because then it could lead people to believe that I don't have enough faith. And so that's
Mm.
where I say we have to learn how to listen, and we have to learn how to communicate with that person that might just church themselves or
Right.
preach to themselves. Nope, 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 you're fine. Nope, you're fine. No, you're okay. Nope, you just give it to Jesus. No, you're okay. I'm not okay. I'm
Right.
not okay.
Right.
I'm
Right.
not okay. And I very much love God, and I know who he is and where he's doing, but I'm also not okay. So
Right.
multiple things can be true at once. And we have to be able to create that space to allow people to feel those multiple things at once.
Now, what do you do to manage your self care when it comes to times of uncertainty? Like I said, struggling with faith or being isolated. How do you still try to maintain your peace and maintain your self care during those times?
Mhm. For me, what is most important is that I honor anything that comes up.
Okay.
So whatever I'm feeling, regardless of my faith belief, my belief system, my background, my upbringing, I'm going to let that come up. So if I'm angry, well, I'm just going to be angry. Now I'm going to assess if I'm depressed, if I feel down, I'm going to assess, okay, are you safe? Are you okay? What are you missing? And in this moment, how how you're feeling going to change within this upcoming circumstances. Okay, you got to go to work, or you're getting ready to go meet some friends, or whatever's getting ready to happen.
Right.
Is your current feeling going to change based on your circumstances? So it's really about checking in with me and assessing, hey, this is how I'm feeling, not punishing myself, not beating myself up about it, but also making sure that I don't stay there. That's where, making sure that I have resources available to me, making sure that I keep myself connected to those that I feel safe with, keeping up with those friendships. And then for me, one of the things was making sure that I get out of the house. Sunlight is life for me. And making sure that I have, even if I have to go get one, if I have one item, I just need some toothpaste. Okay, well, get up and go get the toothpaste because it makes you get out of the house.
Yeah.
You're seeing other people, you're engaging, and the physical act of getting up and moving is going to help release endorphins, and maybe getting a little exercise in, maybe getting that sunlight, maybe finding something to that I enjoy on TV, finding a way to laugh, anything that can bring my current feeling up. I'm always aiming for up. So I try not to sit with, oh, I don't feel good. Well, now
Mhm.
is not the great time to go rehearse all of your life's mistakes,
Mhm.
right? Because now you're going to start to spiral downward. So, self care for me looks like honoring my feelings, assessing them, making sure that I have safe individuals in a support system around me who I
Mhm.
do feel comfortable saying, I'm not okay. So, can you check on me? And then getting up and moving and getting out of the house.
What are some things that someone can do if they're in a state of isolation? And what I mean, uh, you've done some things with your sisters and friends to keep that connection.
Mhm.
Would you mind sharing some of your experiences?
Absolutely. My sisters and I have what I refer to as our G unit night.
Mhm.
Last name starts with a G. So with the G unit, we get together every 2 weeks. We have a Zoom night. We play games, whatever one individual hosts, and whatever the host desires is what we do. We might have conversations. We might just look at dog pictures together, which is quite often what we do. We might just share stories. We might host a game, do puzzles, whatever it is. But that's a standing appointment, to make sure that we connect with each other within our family unit. Me and some other girlfriends do the same thing. We make sure, hey, at least once a month, we got to see each other. We got to lay
Yeah.
eyes on each other to make sure that we're okay. We have a healthy space. And then it's doing the things that I, spoke on just a bit ago, where I'm making sure I get out of the house. I think the most important thing is to move,
Okay.
is to make sure that you are moving. Um, for me, I assign a couple of things per week to make sure that I'm doing. I have my toiletries. I might
Mhm.
even break up my toiletries. If I need 6 items, I'll break it up into three. I'll go get three. And
Mhm.
then 2 or 3 days later, I'll go get the other three to make sure that I'm moving and to make sure that I'm getting out. It might be something as simple as joining meetup groups, and kind of planning some events, watching sports together. So things that I could do that were intentional and that involved other people that would check on me if I didn't, for whatever reason, show up, or
Right.
if I was late, or if I wasn't there. So being very intentional about those things, and creating that space and that community for myself, is what I would suggest for other people, to really make sure that you are honing in on what your community looks like and how they can embrace you in your current season, not who you want to be or who
Okay.
you used to be, or well, I'm trying to get over this. Okay, but even when you're not over this, you're still worthy, and you're still valuable, and you're still
Right.
worth being invested in. So find your community as you are, and then grow into who you want to become.
Okay. And the reason why I asked that, because when you had told me that, we actually had dinner on Zoom. We
Yeah.
sat down, grabbed some dinner, and just had a conversation. And I've
Yeah.
never done that before. I've always associated Zoom with meetings, work. So when you was like, "Hey, let's just have dinner," I'm like, "Well, you're in Texas and I'm in Colorado. What do you mean have dinner?"
Mhm.
You're like, "No, we're
Yeah.
gonna sit down,
Yeah.
talk, and Zoom." And I thought that was so neat. I told my daughter, and she goes, "Well, Star's in town."
Yeah.
I said, "No, we're about to do this. We're doing this on Zoom."
Yeah.
But it was just so neat that you don't have to go fly somewhere to be in presence of someone. With
Yes.
today's technology, just be able to hop on and just saying,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be nothing extravagant. How's your day? Let's talk. Let's do this. Like you said, let's look at dog photos.
Right.
we're in, with each other, checking in. So you don't feel isolated. It still has that same connection, even though it's not physical, like we talked about earlier.
Yes.
It's a connection. And I just wanted to speak more on that, because I don't want anyone to ever think that because you're in a situation of being alone, there's not ways that you can find connection. So if you can't
Absolutely.
have physical touch, at least start off by finding some type of Zoom where you can connect with family members and friends. And when
Mhm.
you do become comfortable, then, like Starr said, the meetups, you go to places once a week or whatever's in your comfort level to associate, with other things or other people, because sometimes loneliness is not being around people. It can just be in nature. You just want to be involved in something else. So don't be afraid that just because no one's around, you can definitely connect for free. You don't have to buy a plane ticket to see somebody, but you do have to make the attempt to be intentional with the community that you do have. So that's
Absolutely.
why I was like, what does she mean? Let's have dinner. And
Mhm.
she's in Texas. So yeah, I love that
Yeah.
idea. And I just wanted you to talk more about that, because the game night,
Yeah.
like you said, you
Yeah.
guys had a scavenger hunt, you and your friend and her daughter. And I'm like,
Yeah.
scavenger hunt? How did
We
she
did.
do that?
Yeah.
All on Zoom.
All on
So,
Zoom.
so it's like being creative with what you have. And for me, like you said, I'm married, but then there is times that I do feel lonely because my husband has his own
Absolutely.
things going on. We are meant to be individuals but married at the same time. And
Mhm.
sometimes you feel that certain feeling, like, I feel kind of lonely today.
Yeah.
I don't know how to tell him that I'm lonely because it's not him. I'm just
Mhm.
feeling a sense of feeling right now where I don't want to be by myself and internalize it, where I get in a deep hole. But at the
Yes.
same time, it's like, how do you tell someone that what's going on? But like you said, you got to use your words.
Yes.
So,
Yes, you do. I
yeah.
think it's fantastic. That is always so fun to see people kind of branch out like, oh, I didn't think about, maybe doing a Zoom dinner or, and
Right.
we can do the things that we normally would do. So, you can cook together on Zoom and have a meal or, sit and watch the game together. Netflix and Hulu and some of those other platforms have watch night parties, where you can invite people to the same thing and you guys are watching it together. And there's lots of ways. That's the positive part of social media and technology, where you can connect a little easier
Mhm.
when it isn't possible to just get in the plane or get on the plane or get in the car and go to another state, especially if you have a smaller um, community
Mhm.
than where you maybe originally are from. My entire family's in Colorado. I'm in Texas, so it's
Right.
just making
Right.
sure that we stay together, and that's easy and effective. I'm the one that has the Zoom as far as like I have a paid subscription. It
Mhm.
isn't. It doesn't cost a lot, but even for those that can't afford that, they do have the free versions. They're 40 minutes, where they allow you to meet with people for 40 minutes or so. Once the 40 minutes is up, you log back in, do it, and start again.
Right.
So there's ways around it. It really is about finding the thing that's the most effective for you, that's most cost effective, that's time friendly, and that can help you create that and keep that community.
Now, my last question: at what point can do you recommend, if someone is in a state of isolation, when should you seek help? Now, maybe you're in a season of sadness, maybe you're in a season of loneliness. At
Mhm.
what time should you be like, okay, I need to seek professional help with being lonely? Is
Absolutely.
there a certain time, or when we can say, hey, it's time now to pull the trigger, let me seek additional help?
That's a great question. And I think my thought around that is, it's hard to say that there's a specific factor or thing to look for because us being individuals, I might not have that
Okay.
factor or thing, and it might show up for you.
Hmm.
So it's hard to really identify the one or two things. I think the the most broad thing that I can think of is time. The time that has elapsed in you feeling the way that you feel. It's, we can feel like that situationally. There's a such thing as situational depression. So,
Hmm.
let's say you've lost your job and are looking for jobs and you're interviewing and you're kind of going through this point, and then you land a job and you notice immediately that that sense of frustration and depression and, sadness and angst has lifted because the situation improved. But I think the most generic thing I would suggest is paying attention to that amount of time and
Okay.
how you're struggling throughout that time. When you think about your day, how much of your day is spent with those feelings? How much of the week are you spending feeling that way? And I don't think that is there's a specific time that I can say, well, at 36 hours,
Right, right.
this go. I think it's really about breaking it down for you, because if you as a busy person, if you only have 2 or 3 hours to yourself in a day, well, how much of that 2 or 3 hours are you spending feeling that way and having to fight these feelings? And you might notice that 2 of the 3 hours you're feeling that way. Well, you might need to seek help at that time.
Okay.
Whereas someone else might be able to go for a month or so and kind of navigate. They don't feel the best, but they're able to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say time. I would say also looking for the differences in how you function. Um, are you still functioning? Are you noticing that your house isn't as clean as it once was? You're not leaving the house as much. You're not talking, you're getting phone calls, but you're declining them more often. The things that you used to do don't bring you joy. You're not enjoying, you're not laughing, you're not watching the shows that you were watching. When you start to see the changes and not recognizing who you are, go ahead and seek help.
Okay.
Go ahead and look for the opportunity to find a safe community, whether that's a support group or therapy, or, there's lots of different platforms that are even virtual now, where we can connect with help a little bit easier. There's the support groups that are often online, even through Facebook and some of those other platforms, where we might be able to just connect with other people going through this specific thing. So I really would say time, and then watching yourself change. And this is also the time where we have to be very authentic with
Mm,
ourselves, and we can't be afraid to go, no, I am feeling depressed. I
right.
am. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, coming from a faith base, I have learned for many, many years, it's indoctrinated in me to push that away. No, those feelings are bad. Go pray, go pray, go pray, go pray.
Mm-hmm.
And so after a while, I'm like, I am 103 years old, and the praying just is not working. Like, I'm still feeling down, and so really being able to be authentic with myself to go, I might be dealing with something else.
Right.
It might be something more than, it doesn't mean that you're crazy or that you're a bad person or that you've done something wrong. It means that, the tools that you used to cope before aren't as effective. And maybe you need to connect with someone to get a new toolbox.
Right. And just being, at the end of the year, 2022, we're still adjusting to what has happened with the pandemic.
Right.
So just trying to, like I said, get a sense of either it's a new normal or back to normal, or just even getting your footing on the ground. You're, like I said, you're still trying to find you in it
Mhm.
all. And I think that's why I was so passionate about doing this mental health series, because I believe a lot of us had time to deal with ourselves. And some things we noticed we didn't like, some things were like, even those that were in households with, spouses and kids, hey, I'm not feeling these kids and I ain't feeling a spouse. So it's
Absolutely.
like, it was a lot of things that we
Yeah.
learned in that pandemic. But
Mhm.
the one thing that everyone forgot to talk about is the isolation.
Yeah.
Yeah, anxiety, depression, suicide, burnout, stress. Those are those things that we talk about, but no one really said, but what about those that are isolated?
Mhm.
What about the ones that are in turn dealing with stuff and no one knows anything about, because either they're a high functioning depression
Yep.
person, or they're just day by day living. So
Mhm.
this conversation that I'm having with you, it really opened my eyes up, because we get so focused on ourselves sometimes that we do forget about our friends that, like you said, are married or single, or a single mom with kids. They are
Absolutely.
also lonely. They also feel the same thing that most people feel. But I want to make sure that we had the conversation that there is tools that we can use to work ourselves and heal from it. because I believe we all go through some type of isolation. It may not have been the pandemic, but it might have been a moment in our life that we had to go through a season of something. I just
Absolutely.
don't want us to stay there and get stuck. So
Absolutely.
this conversation really, like I said, really helped me open my eyes that it doesn't mean a single person is the only person that deals with isolation. We
Absolutely.
all have in some form. So I'm so grateful that you came on and just shared, the things that you've been through, some of the things that you've dealt with and even overcame. And just really appreciate your time coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed being here, and thank you for creating that space for my voice. And then for those who maybe will use my voice as their own because they are not able to speak for themselves.
Yes, thank you so much. And as we end today's episode, um, I'll make sure that the information that Starr provides, I'll have it in the show notes. But please, moving forward, if you're someone that's struggling with isolation, struggling like you're going through something, please, use your words and let trusted family members or friends or support system know, hey, I'm here, let's check on each other. If you know of another person that's kind of in the same situation, have a weekly check-in. Like Star say, do Zoom meetings or Zoom games or whatever's comfortable for you. Just make sure that you're out using your voice, stating what you need in this time. So I pray that this episode helps. Until next week, you guys, have a great week. See you.
Thank you.